Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today, and for those that are online, we appreciate you visiting with us for the next hour as we have Molly Wuebker here from Des Moines. She's here to talk to us about universal design. We in the Spencer ADA Council have been very interested in this topic, and so we are certainly learning a lot ourselves about this, but we look to Molly as an expert to give us a little more information that helps us know how we can adapt and we can improve accessibility in our community. So without further ado, I'll introduce Molly.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming and spending your evening with me. We are going to talk about universal design, but I always like to give some credit to the ADA, right, before we dive into that, because, you know, that is a monumental piece of legislation, and because we have the Spencer ADA Council, which I like to give credit to them too. In my line of work, and especially in Iowa, I have worked with a lot of state and local governments, and there is not another city that I have worked with that has an actual ADA council. So I just want to give you guys credit and how unique that is and how special that is. And what I think even makes that more special is the fact that I am actually from Spencer myself. So I am native to Spencer. I have a fun picture that my mom actually helped me dig up last night. I thought it might be fitting to swap out more of my traditional headshot and go for a more nostalgic look. And you can kind of see the graininess of it, kind of it dates it a little bit there. But I'm representing Spencer Tigers. And so that was even fun today. Earlier today, I was at the Spencer High School. So I actually got to visit. It's definitely changed. I saw a lot of good accessibility things when I was there. So that was great. But yeah, so my married name is Wuebker, but my maiden name is Cruz. And so my parents, Jane and David Cruz, also are here in the audience. So yeah, I know. So in terms of what I do, so I am an accessibility consultant. I serve as the Iowa Liaison for Great Plains ADA Center. And Great Plains ADA Center is Iowa's regional ADA center. So there are 10 total in the United States. They are all operated under the ADA National Network, and which is funded through a federal grant. So for Great Plains ADA Center, we cover Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. And so primarily, Great Plains' role and my role is to provide technical assistance and training related to the ADA. Now, because this is recorded, I don't want to presume that everyone knows what the ADA is. I know I've only kind of used the abbreviation of it, but, and it's not the American Dental Association, although if you Googled it, that would come up. But it stands for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so that's what we are providing technical assistance and training on, is this historical monumental piece of legislation that really changed the game for people with disabilities in order for them to access employment and public accommodations and services. So with that, one thing I obviously my favorite topic is accessibility, but I also love history, which I ironically think I get from my dad. And so one fun historical fact about the ADA is actually that its roots are based in Iowa. So, and I actually heard Senator Tom Harkin's name brought up over here earlier. And so former Senator Tom Harkin, he was the legislature that pushed this bill, was able to get this bill passed. I mean, it was because he had a personal connection. His brother was deaf, and he wanted to help his brother have opportunities towards employment and being able to access programs and services. And so in 1990 was when the Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted and implemented. And so in July, we celebrated our 35th year anniversary for the ADA. So that's very significant. But not only that, the actual ADA bill itself is archived bill is housed at Drake University. So you can actually go and visit it. And of course, they also have it available in Braille, right? Which is very much the spirit of the ADA. So when we're talking about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, there's 5 different titles that it covers. But ultimately, I'm going to kind of sum those up under 1, employment. All right, so it is about creating equal opportunities for people, not only in hiring, but also in advancement. It provides coverage for state and local government entities. So Spencer City, the city of Spencer, Clay County, they also have responsibilities towards providing facility access, towards providing program access because of the ADA, as well as private businesses. And that kind of falls under Title III. And that's where we have like the 2010 standards for accessible design. So those are all those kind of technical design requirements that architects and builders have to follow when they are altering, renovating, or designing a new space. And so there's requirements that they have to follow when they're doing that. That is all because of the ADA. Now, and right in here, since we have our, this is being recorded, there's a picture on the screen of George H.W. Bush, who actually was the one that signed this legislation when it was implemented July 26th of 1990. Now, another important thing that I like to stress anytime I'm talking about accessibility is, well, why does it matter? And I think that's a really important thing to cover before we kind of get into the thick of universal design. So first, if we look at this statewide, there are 372,527 people with disabilities in Iowa. And so that makes up 12% of Iowans that live with a disability. And I also think it's important because this actually came up in one of the earlier sessions that I gave today, is that's just people who identify with a disability or who have reported that they have a disability. So a comment was made of earlier that it's probably even higher than that, and I concur with that. But if we actually look at Spencer specifically, so there is a website that the ADA, Great Plains ADA Center, the ADA National Network actually worked on to help identify how many people at state and local government agencies live with a disability. So I was actually able to pull that for Spencer. So Spencer is like made up of a little over like 11,000 residents, I believe. So 15% of that are people with disabilities. And the percentage of people with mobility disabilities was the highest. So it's just kind of a really, at least for me, when I'm doing accessibility projects, I like to know those numbers because anytime I'm recommending accessibility, there's always funding involved and pursuing grants, and grants like to see those numbers. They like to know, well, why is this important? Well, we have these many people in our community that this could benefit from. The other thing I think it's important to mention is that when we talk about disability, it is the largest minoritized group in the world, and it's the only minoritized group that any one of us can join at any time. And I think that's important because you can have a permanent disability, but you could also have a temporary disability. At one time or another, you know, we maybe have broken a leg or an arm or needed to use a wheelchair, even if it was for short term. And at those times, we benefited from that ramp, right? But also age. Age is the leading cause of disability, and we're all getting older. And so for that reason alone, it's important. I think there's 75 million people, baby boomers, right now, and And of those individuals, they're experiencing, because we're living longer, partially because of medical advancements, but we also are sustaining disability-related injuries as a result. So another reason why it's important to think about accessibility and being proactive. So I've talked about disability, but I also like to define disability. So one thing that I haven't noted is that my background is actually in occupational therapy. And so I have worked as an occupational therapist and had my licensure for over 15 years. And I worked across the lifespan in a variety of different settings, all the while taking a very special interest in accessibility. But primarily in my role as an occupational therapist, I was working with people after a problem had already occurred. So whether it's because of an injury or an illness or another circumstance, I was having to work and more taking a approach where I'm looking at fixing that person, right? Well, now that I've been working as my career has evolved, I've taken more of a proactive approach, more preventative care approach, and thinking of rather than that person being disabled, it's the environment that's disabled. And I think one of the most classic examples of that is your stairs versus ramps. So if a person is not able to get into a building because there are stairs, it's not because that person's in a wheelchair. It's because there are stairs. Those stairs is what's causing that person to not. There's a design intervention, a solution to this. So we just need to incorporate it in. And when we do that, then those individuals are able to access those facilities in that environment. So that's the definition that I like to use. It's the definition that the actual disability community uses. It's just that I don't view myself as having a disability. I view the environment as being disabled. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Judy Heumann. Now, Judy Heumann, she is basically the mother of the disability rights movement. She was a huge contributor to the ADA, but she was also a huge contributor to other disability-related movements as well, and just the civil rights movement in general. And she herself, I always liked this quote, but she herself says, "Disability only becomes a tragedy when society fails to provide the things we need to live our lives. Job opportunities or barrier-free buildings, it's not a tragedy to me that I'm living in a wheelchair." So this is just who she is. She was born that way. She doesn't know any other way. And so for her, it's not she is not disabled as the environment. So that brings me to universal design and to the curb cut effect. And I mentioned earlier that I like history, so here's another history lesson. So the very first example of universal design actually came from the curb cut. So all of us, I think even to access this building, probably used a curb cut outside to get here. So that's your, ubiquitous curb ramp that's on all the different street corners, allowing us to use that crosswalk. So back in the 1940s in Kalamazoo, Michigan, there were veterans returning from World War II, and they were not able to cross their street because of 6 inches of concrete. So the city of Kalamazoo decided to go and pour concrete ramps, these makeshift ramps, to allow these veterans to be able to cross the street. Now, what ended up happening, though, was it not only benefited the veterans, but it also ended up benefiting parents pushing their children in strollers, bike riders, skateboarders, employees who were pushing carts, people pulling their luggage, individuals who were blind, people pulling their oxygen tank. A lot of people benefited from that design change for people with mobility disabilities. That is universal design. And that is the curb cut effect. So that is also what inspired the name of my consulting business, Uncurbed, of noting that philosophy of if we prioritize people with disabilities into our design decision making, we will end up creating these solutions that will have a net benefit for everybody. So I really like that story because I think that it truly is the original universal design. Before universal design even had a name, it was the curb cut. So let's talk about universal design. So when we talk about universal design, there's 8 goals. Now it's evolved over the years. It started with 7 principles, but now there's 8 goals. So one of the goals is body fit. So just looking and recognizing the diversity of body types, right? We have shorter stature. We have myself, who's really tall. I'm like the top shelf queen. We have petite, larger individuals. So making sure that when we are designing, we're recognizing the diversity in body types is important. Comfortability, right? So also if we are in a space or we're using a product, what is the comfort level of doing that? Is another important aspect. Awareness. So one thing about the ADA is it's very focused on physical design. What I like about universal design is it's looking at other types of disabilities, like individuals who are blind, deaf, sensory sensitivities, and awareness is kind of where that comes into play. So things like looking at signage or design as navigation tools for wayfinding to help people know where they need to go, to help provide them with the information that they need to make an effective decision to be safe, to prevent falls. There's a lot of different kind of design solutions out there that help people in that way, that help build awareness. Understanding is in the same category. Individuals who are blind. For them, being able to access digital information is really important. So there are screen readers out there that will read back what that text says. So websites have to be accessible in order for them to do that. But nowadays, a lot of us are benefiting from that technology. Instead of reading books, right, we're listening to audiobooks more and more when we're driving, right? So we're benefiting from that. So that's another example of universal design. Wellness. So originally in the 7 principles of universal design, there wasn't a huge focus on kind of the mental aspect, the mental health that design can help or promote. And so with these new goals, it kind of takes more, or it adds to or complements, not just thinking about physical health, but also mental health. So with wellness, it's about, 1, creating those spaces for individuals who maybe need more calm or quiet. It's about thinking about acoustics, about lighting, all of those things that promote kind of mental health. Social integration, so being able to provide opportunities to connect with people rather than be segregated from people. Is another important thing. Personalization, so allowing people choices and options. When individuals with disabilities, if you think of, let's talk about like youth sports today, for example. If you're a teenager, you have so many options of clubs and all these things that you can join, right? If you're a person with a disability, you might have 1 or 0 options. Not as many as an individual without a disability. So it's about personalization. It's about being able to have more choices and opportunities in what you're able to do and participate in. And then cultural appropriateness. So also recognizing that disability is just one factor in a person's life, right? There's a lot of personal factors, whether it's your family, your values, your religion, your ethnicity, and all of these things kind of intersect with disability as well. And so it's making sure that we are also thinking about that when we're designing. And how do we make sure that we're not discriminating someone based off of those other personal factors that also make up that person. So when we look at ADA and universal design side by side, one, ADA is a civil rights law. Universal design is more of a design mindset. It's a process and it's a framework. The ADA sets minimum requirements. I like to say that it is a baseline, not the finish line. Universal design is always striving for the best experience. The ADA removes barriers, so there's already barriers that exist sometimes. Universal design prevents those barriers from happening. It anticipates those barriers. ADA is compliance focused, whereas universal design is more people focused. So it's really about understanding who is the community that we are trying to serve and making sure that they're investing in them. So that's kind of the side to side. Now, the ADA, though, is still important. We still need those minimum standards. But again, it's that baseline. So now let's talk about some other examples. I gave you the original example of universal design, but I always think it's kind of eye-opening when I talk about these because a lot of people don't recognize these kind of everyday objects that we use and that we don't even know that they actually started as an accessibility feature. So the first one in this image here, and I'll try to describe it since this is being recorded, is an automatic sliding door. So this was created to help individuals with disabilities who maybe don't have the fine motor or upper body control to be able to open doors. But as a result, it also benefits people who are pushing their shopping carts through or pushing their strollers through. So it benefits a lot of people. The lever door, or lever handle, excuse me. So many of you are probably familiar, we don't see them as much anymore, but of the old doorknobs, right? And so when we're using a doorknob, that requires a lot of fine motor strength. Right? And individuals, especially who have arthritis, that can put a lot of tension over time. Now, the lever handle was actually created for individuals with arthritis, to help them to kind of reduce that tension. But I benefit from this. I just think about, so I'm a mom of 3 children, and I'm kind of the grocery shopper in the family, and I'm trying to go inside my house, and I'm carrying, I like to try to get it all in one if I can, right? Because I usually have kids I'm chasing in front of me, and so I'm carrying them, and now I can just go up, elbow it, and get inside, right? An individual with a disability, if they don't have the ability to open up their hand, maybe it's just they have a clenched fist, they can now go down and open. They don't have to have that fine motor strength. So that's another just example of how we created something for people with disabilities, but I benefit from it, other people benefit from it. Another really big one is closed captioning. So I'm sure many of us, we like Netflix now is kind of commonplace, or other streaming services. And closed captioning was created for individuals who are deaf so that they would be able to read what's going on. Again, using my experience as a mom, I am in a household with 3 kids, 2 dogs. It can get loud. So anytime, I'm watching TV or we're watching TV as a family, we have closed captioning on because there's so many times where we miss something, or it just helps us to be able to kind of process it better. Sometimes we receive things more visually than we do auditorily, and that's also why I was wanting to get my closed captioning up here on the screen. I'm wondering how many of you, as I was speaking, was looking at that and reading it. You're doing that because that's how you learn. Whether it's because of a disability or not, we all benefit, right? Now, I joked earlier, though, that there's always pros and cons when it comes to design, right? One of which is closed captioning is great, but it does reveal spoilers sometimes. So that's the one con. But we can get over that one. The other thing is texting. Texting, they have autocorrect or like drag and dictate. So ultimately, those were actually design features that were created for people to reduce the amount of typing that they would have to do. So again, it was more of like a fine motor solution. If you don't have the dexterity, the manipulation skills to be able to type, we're going to try to reduce that for you through autocorrect, okay? But how many of us also maybe use that? If we get, okay, I'm starting with TH, and theater pops up, well, I'm going to select that because it's just going to go faster. So it's more of a convenience thing for us. There's also voice texting, right? That was another feature that was added. And how many people do that? You're now driving in your cars and you can say, hey, Siri, text mom. Right? So we all, again, are benefiting, but still, there's a con when it comes to autocorrect, and that's why I chose this one, because sometimes it says up here, love you, how's the morning sickness, not too bad today, I can't believe that we're having another baby, I'm leaving you. What? Now I'm leaving work now, I'm not leaving you. Now I'm really gonna throw up. So there's, again, universal design has its pros and cons, but ultimately I think the pros outweigh those cons. Another example, we now have these little internet hubs, right? These Siri, Alexa, Echo, Google Homes, right? That we all can use, and ultimately they were primarily used or benefited for people with disabilities. So you could say, lights on, turn off the TV, order DoorDash, whatever it is nowadays. Those are things that were created for people with disabilities, but again, we are people of convenience. We like to find efficiency. We're always going to find kind of the fastest way to get things done. And if this is going to make my day more productive, then I'm gonna use it. And that's what that has turned into. We've benefited from it. And then the last example that I have here is even your tap reader for credit cards. Originally, although you still can do it, insert your credit card, but again, that requires a certain amount of fine motor skills. Now we have the tap reader, so you just kind of hover over, or there's Apple Pay, Google Pay. So a lot of those options, but those are universal design. So one of the things that I get asked a lot in my work is, okay, so very cool, but like, how do you even do this? Like, how do you even promote universal design? How do you know what to do? Where do you start? And my answer always stays the same. It's go to the people that are most affected by design, and that is people with disabilities. So again, that's why Spencer having an ADA council is so wonderful, because there's this advisory group that exists here. There's these individuals that are there to help provide or promote accessibility. And so I think that's a really great place to start. And it's what I use within my own job. Anytime I'm doing consulting work, a big part of it is community engagement. I'm reaching out to individuals with disabilities, but also recognizing that process of reaching out to individuals with disabilities also has to be accessible, right? So we have to meet them typically. I have to go to where they are a lot. Or we have to make sure that if we are meeting, it's an accessible location. I need to make sure that all of my documents are accessible, screen reader friendly. I need to make sure that I'm providing opportunities for accommodations for people. So all of those things are important when I'm doing any sort of participatory design with people. So I wanted to share some examples of work that I've done and highlight some of those universal design features that exist out there. So one of the work projects that I did was at Athene North Shore Recreation Area at Easter Lake Park. Now this is located in Des Moines, Iowa. And if you're familiar with where the state fair is, it's in East Des Moines, so kind of over more in that direction. But it's with Polk County Conservation. So this is a local government agency who has requirements towards the ADA, but they really wanted to go above and beyond the ADA. And so I was brought on as a universal design consultant and worked with Scheid Hattery was the architect company. And one of the big features that's very unique to this park is that it has a zero entry concrete ramp that goes directly into the water to Easter Lake. There's nothing like that we know of, at least in the country at this point. Not a concrete ramp. There's also handrails to help guide you down. The other, and some other kind of important features on there, there is an accessible pontoon, so people can come and they can hook up their wheelchairs onto the pontoon. They can go fishing, not just shoreline fishing, but actually go out on a boat. There's accessible kayak launch, there's an accessible rowing launch, and not just on one side, but kind of both sides of the park. There is an inclusive playground, and I have another picture that I'll show more of a close-up. The other thing that was really big, and this came back to the community engagement, is because we reached out via survey, but we also did focus groups. But across both, the biggest thing was accessible restrooms. So a lot of times that if a restroom is not accessible, individuals, no matter what other cool accessible features, so even if we had this zero entry ramp, people would not come. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is we always, sometimes we're like, oh, we want to invest towards the really cool things, right? But sometimes then we neglect the kind of mundane, yes. So it's important that we remember, at the end of the day, we still need to invest in your facilities in restrooms. And one of the big things is that we have an adult-sized changing table, an adjustable adult-sized changing table, because a lot of times individuals with disabilities, especially when they're traveling, they would find themselves having to change their adult individual family member with a disability or their client, person served on the dirty floor of the bathroom. And so that was a really big one. The other important thing about this is that they have adaptive equipment. So they have adaptive kayaks with outriggers and different things to support different people. They have beach kind of mobility chairs that can go directly into the water. So you can transfer a person from wheelchair, put them into this beach chair, go directly in. They also have mobility mats, so Mobi mats, in addition to that zero entry, so that can actually be rolled out on any place on the beach or even on the grassy lawn, and it will make it easier for people with disabilities to come and be closer to their family members, no matter where they decide to kind of park. So a lot of really cool features here. This is a close-up of the playground that we worked on. So one of the big things is a splash pad. So I am always a huge advocate for splash pads as an accessibility feature because for a lot of individuals with disabilities, some individuals can't actually go and be fully submerged in water for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're immunocompromised. Maybe they have a GI tube that can't get submerged. Some individuals just have kind of water sensitivities, so it might be too overwhelming for them to fully go and swim. Some don't know how to swim altogether, or don't have the coordination to be able to swim safely. So having a splash pad then provides an equivalent experience for those individuals, and in a really safe way. So I really do advocate for splash pads. It's also nice because, especially at a park, there's a lot of children, especially, but adults too, who can get overheated. And some even overheating could result or trigger seizures. I mean, there's a lot of different factors involved. And having some sort of mist or cooling feature can help with that. Also on this screen, there is a accessible merry-go-round. So it's zero entry again, it's flush, it's level, allowing a wheelchair to directly get rolled onto it to be side-by-side play with your peers. There is a slide. Now, traditional slides, metal slides, right? You're going down pretty fast. And they like to produce a lot of static. And there's a lot of children where that static can actually trigger sensory sensitivities. And so this particular slide actually has rollers on it, and the type of material reduces that amount of static, so then reduces those sensory sensitivities. But also those rollers produce sensory input, or kind of deep input. So as you're going down, it can kind of provide sensory regulation for some children who might easily get unregulated or dysregulated. There's also a route that takes them directly all the way around to an elevated play component to kind of look out over the entire beach area. And the other thing they have is a raised sand table so that a wheelchair could directly go underneath and have some sensory play at their own level, or you could stand and still play in it. So if you aren't able to go onto the beach for whatever reason, then you have that opportunity. And the other thing that I always like to say is remembering that not everybody's play is the same. So not everybody is seeking physical play. Sometimes we're more into music, right? Or we're more into kind of tactile play. So there's opportunities for that too. There's musical instruments that have been incorporated into this too. And even the nature and the plants themselves have been incorporated into play. So being able to go and directly touch those plants and engage in those, it's another type of play. And I guess the last thing I'll talk about on this, on the screen, they've used the actual surfacing is a rubberized surface. So it kind of allows that cushion, because you do need to have a bit of a cushion when it comes to like playground equipment. But there's different kind of color contrast that we use, and that was intentional. So there's this kind of blue rubberized surfacing that kind of meanders through. It almost looks like water, right? Well, that was intentional. Again, it was meant to kind of tie back to the whole nature aesthetic, the fact that there is a lake that's adjacent to it. But it also, because the entrance, the main entrance to that, the playground, is on kind of the far left side of the screen, it provides students kind of cognitively wayfinding or navigation. So start here, work your way through kind of this meandering path. So it's another thing from a cognitive perspective, is it's helping kind of guide them through the different types of equipment. So another project that I'm working on currently is actually in your backyard. So there's the Better River Trails Experience Project, and this is a partnership with Iowa DNR, and we are specifically looking at the Little Sioux River. So this is actually a picture at Thunder Bridge, which I spent many times going over, because how fun is that? I mean, to go, it does sound like thunder, for sure. So with that project, we are specifically looking at an entry point for carry-down watercraft, so whether that's kayaking, inner tubing, around Stolly Park, and then an exit on, it would be West Leach Park, but on the north side, so the more elevated side. And there's potential opportunity for that area to turn into recreational use. But when we're talking about rivers, the challenge is, as you all know, unfortunately, is that they fluctuate. And they can sometimes be unpredictable, right? And so we're trying to come up with design plans that are not only accessible, but also resilient and flood-proof. And so that is the project that we're currently working on. I guess the one word, though, that I really want to highlight in this is the word experience. So better river trails experience. So in my line of work, I always like to share with individuals is that when we're looking at the act of kayaking, that activity for an individual with a disability doesn't start on site. It starts way before that. It starts when they're planning on the website. And if they are looking up something on the website and they're not able to because that website's not accessible, or there isn't any information that says that there's an accessible restroom on site, then they will not choose to go. So again, it ties back to, well, we invested all this money in making these accessible launches, but we're not telling people, we're not effectively communicating it to them. And so it really then kind of becomes pointless at that point. So that's another kind of piece of this project is we are going to be working on, well, what needs to be on a website? What is that effective communication that we need to share with individuals to help them plan their trip? The other thing is programming. So one of the things through community engagement was, again, you can make this really cool, accessible, physically designed space, but if you don't have programming to support it, although some people will maybe independently go, a lot of individuals might also want or request somebody who has experience working with people with disabilities, but also kayaking or water recreation. And so that's going to be another aspect of this. So we're working collaboratively with Spencer Parks and Rec, so Bob Fullhart. We're working with Will Horsley from Clay County Conservation to really kind of target that adaptive programming so that we're not only going to be focusing on the physical design, but also the programming, so that we can really kind of create this holistic and kind of comprehensive approach to accessibility. And I believe in doing that is sustainability then, right? Because if we're looking at all of these touch points for these people with disabilities and this ecosystem, and we're making sure that each of those are accessible, well, then that's going to enhance the sustainability of it. So the last project that I'm going to talk about is Sleepy Hollow Revitalization Project. So Sleepy Hollow is another one in Des Moines. And this is a ski and sports park. It's, again, Polk County Conservation. So Polk County Conservation has fully bought into this universal design, which is amazing. So they are completely revitalizing it. And so right now, some of the program features that they offer is year-round tubing. So obviously in the winter, it's snow tubing, but in the summer, they have this really cool, it's called Snowflex. But it's basically this like carpet that you get wet, and then you'll go tubing down it, and it will get up to like 35 miles per hour, and you get major air on it. It's awesome. But they offer this year-round kind of tubing experience. In the winter, they also offer skiing. So there's a lot of really cool things that they offer. So I'm working, and this is a current project. We're still in the design development phase of this. So what you're seeing right there is more of like a draft version of the Sleepy Hollow site design. So you can see that there's a pond on there. They're using that primarily for snowmaking. But also the goal is for there to be accessible fishing opportunities. There is a lodge there on site, and we're looking also at the lodge itself, of course, emphasizing restroom accessibility, because that's what the people want. We're going to give it to them. And then we also have made a lot of design considerations for accessible parking and entry, usable doors, thinking about like the boot up stations, storage for adaptive equipment. We're thinking about it all. One of the big things that I've found in my research is what they're referred to as magic carpets. So they're like this conveyor belt that you can basically, at least at Sleepy Hollow right now, you stand on it and it moves. It's basically the what are those things called at walkways in airports? It's like those, but there's more of an incline to them, so they're extra fun. And so that is something that is becoming more prominent at ski resorts itself. And although that's a really great option, not everybody is going to be able to use that safely. And so we found even simple solutions. Well, let's transfer the individual with a disability, if they're in a wheelchair, into the tube at the base versus them getting on at the top, which is traditional, and then sitting in that magic carpet all the way up. And then a person will come and get them and take them around. So simple, right? Like so sometimes accessibility can be done without these kind of grand things. It just requires us to talk to people. So that's kind of a big one. And then the other thing is we're looking at potentially a splash pad, because I love splash pads. But splash pads can also be turned into ice skating rinks in the wintertime. And so with that, well, we need to make sure that it's accessible. So we have these, essentially they're like these sled hockey where you can sit. So again, you're transferring and you can sit on it, and they have kind of almost these like hockey ice picks that they use to kind of propel them forward. There's also almost like it's like a walker in a sense on ice that you can also use too. So there's a lot of different options that we're looking at for program accessibility. But we're still kind of in the design development phase for that. So ultimately, these are all kind of current projects, but I think the one common thing across all of these projects is that we've included people with disabilities. And that's ultimately, I think, the biggest takeaway when you're leaving here and you're thinking about universal design is how can I engage my community of people with disabilities more? And because I think that's truly where innovation comes from. And there's a lot of examples, as I've shown you already, where that's occurred. So with that, I will open it up for questions if anybody has anything for me. As long as they're easy.
Well, just touch back up like what you're saying, that when you incorporate the accessibility, you're thinking of design for ADA, it really, like you say, it takes the projects and opens it up to the community, the whole universal design idea. So really, it's, like you say, it's being more proactive instead of being reactive to this is what the law says.
Right.
It's actually making it a more open, welcoming place for whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of studies that show that universal design, although it can increase costs up front, that long term, because you're not having all of the retrofits that you're having to do, it will save you money long term. And there's also, the income that you're bringing in. You've just increased your target audience now, right? So you're bringing in more income. And because there was a study that came out, it was the return on disability, and I think it was published in 2022, that said 73% of people in the United States are touched by disability. So whether that's because they have a disability or they know someone who has a disability. So we're all touched by it in one way or the other. And so, there is basically about $13 trillion of indisposable income that individuals with with disabilities and their family members combined basically spend. So just imagine if you designed for them, that's good business too, right? But of course, the most important thing is it's just the right thing to do. It's more welcoming, like you said.
So is that kind of the hard selling point for your design, that people see ADA and they think, what can I barely do to get by the compliance?
Yes. Yes.
And when you say universal design, you think, oh my gosh, now I'm going to spend a ton of money on
Yes.
these other things.
Yes.
Or
Absolutely. I mean, so I think a really good example of that is actually when we talk about, which I didn't hear, but talking about aging in place. So that's another concept that's kind of interchanged with universal design. So how can we help our aging adults live longer in their homes? And one of the biggest kind of hurdles is when we're saying, well, let's universally design your homes. Well, yes, that will potentially add about $10,000. It's been estimated about $10,000 extra to your project. All right. But the important then thing is I like to flip it and say, but if you don't do this, and let's say, God forbid, something happens, right? Or you do age, and eventually, because of just natural age itself, you now are going to go to an assisted living facility. Well, those assisted living facilities cost anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000 a year. So if you were to have universally designed your home, you could have saved yourself that money. Your retirement income, right? All of your savings, like all of that, everything that you worked hard for, and you could have stayed in your home, like the place that maybe you grew up in, and that has a lot of meaning for you. So that's kind of the big draw. That is kind of the big selling point that I try to make, is that yes, $10,000 can be a lot, but down the road, you could be saving yourselves upwards of $60,000 to $80,000 a year. And I'm not saying, I do always like to say this caveat though, because I am an OT, that we have to get rid of assisted living facilities, because we need those too. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. There comes a time where we need it, and there comes a time where we need skilled nursing, right? But even those facilities, we could make more universally designed. Interesting enough, my mom just went to a facility today, because she's on the board for St. Luke's, and they were looking at a facility to see, okay, what could we do better to increase quality of life for people as they age? And that's universal design is what they're looking at. I'll bring this up, another comment that was made earlier today is just simply like the autonomy and that dignity piece that I think is really important. Individuals with disabilities, they don't like to ask for help. So anytime that we can offer opportunities where they're not having to do that is helpful. So one of the examples is the ADA does not actually require automatic push buttons on doors, which, not to get on a soapbox, but I think it's kind of crazy, but it just doesn't. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other building codes that do require that, but from the ADA perspective, they don't. Now, but just think about, you go up to a door and you can't enter it. You can't enter this place. It's raining out. It's snowing, right? Like all of those things, and you're just stuck out there waiting for someone to come and open the door for you. One of the examples that I used earlier today of this idea, like that whether you have a disability or an aging adult, not liking to ask for help, was actually my grandpa. So Russ Christensen. So he loved to go to the Royal Cafe and loved to have coffee, donuts with his buddies, right? Well, he ended up sustaining, basically was kicked by a steer and had a subdural hemorrhage. And as a result, ultimately ended up losing his license, so not being able to go and just spontaneously go and drive to visit his buddies at the Royal Cafe. Hated that, right? So what did he do? He got on his lawnmower and at rapid speed, tried to go to the Royal Cafe because he did not want to ask for help. He did not want someone else to do it for him. And I think that it's just a really good example of why it's so important. And in that instance, there really probably was an alternative for him, but I think that is just the idea of how can we try to help people sustain that autonomy and that dignity as much as possible. Because ultimately, our mental health is tied to our physical health. And so it's just so important. Yeah.
Molly, great presentation.
Thank you.
And great information. Just a couple things I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
You have on the Better Trails project,
Yeah.
Auburn University.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Absolutely. So, so that project, we're actually doing institutional review board research, so IRB research. The reason why we're doing that is because, so we're collecting information in a variety of different ways. We're doing a survey. We actually did a water day where we invited, I think, some members from Spencer ADA. We actually have a member from the Spencer ADA Council that's on our advisory board for the Better River Trails with us on that. And we had other individuals that we invited. But it's all research that we're doing. So anytime that we're doing research with actual humans, we want to make sure that we're following proper research procedures. And especially also because those individuals are considered special populations. We're talking about individuals with disabilities. We've also, this project has included members from Dakota tribe because it's actually the Incabaduda Canoe Trail. And so we're also kind of incorporating that into this too. So how can we make this river kind of more inclusive to kind of the history of Dakota as well. So we have kind of these different intersections going on. And so we wanted to make sure that we were following proper research procedure because we're dealing with humans. And the other thing is that we didn't want to gatekeep this information that we find. We wanted to be able to share this publicly after we're all done. And so anytime you're doing that, it's really important that you pursue IRB. And so Auburn University was ultimately a connection to a colleague whose background, she's extensive background in accessible and inclusive design research. So that's ultimately, we just partnered with her at Auburn University for that. So that's that connection.
Can I?
Of course, yeah, please.
I lived 14 years in Pleasant Hill.
Okay, yeah.
So when I lived there, Easter Lake was nothing more than a swamp.
Yep.
And I was really glad to see what you've done there. And
Yeah, have you seen it?
look at it.
Okay, yes.
The other thing, since I was in Pleasant Hill,
Yeah,
Sleepy Hollow was
right there too.
When did the county get that?
Ooh, I don't know the answer to that. I guess I didn't realize. I knew that at one point it was. I guess I don't know when they acquired it, actually.
I want to make one other comment.
Yeah.
I've been in the construction industry all my life, and
Okay.
comment about the university design. So in 2018, we came back, and we live in Altoona. We built a house because we have a daughter who's 42
Okay,
and uses a wheelchair, but we built a universal design home.
awesome.
And I'm telling you that if you think it through, that premium is not there.
Yeah,
It comes from resistance from builders who are locked into doing
right.
the same way.
Yes,
Charging for,
yes,
really look at the cost. I'll give you
I agree.
an example. A typical bathroom in a house is 35 square feet.
Yeah,
Our bathroom for her is 100 square feet. So, yes, it costs more, but we got more square footage.
yeah,
So you have to look at that aspect of your building square footage. And so the premium to build universal design, really, if you plan accordingly, it doesn't cost you anymore. Just
Right.
you got to change old habits. And
Yeah.
I want to charge you for changing old habits.
right. I agree. I absolutely agree.
Probably on a t-shirt. Worst thing to do something different.
Yes.
Because they've always done it that way.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, yeah.
Good.
It is good. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And that actually gives me hope, too, in my line of business. I'm going to have to steal that. I'm sorry.
I'll tell you this, we have people, and I'm well past retirement age, folks, and our daughter, of course, 42 and in a wheelchair. We have people that come in our house and say, boy, this is the way
You should build.
we should build.
Yes.
Because our neighbor across the street recently broke her hip and had to go to the rehabilitation center for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Had steps. Well, there's no steps in our house. You can walk right in.
Yeah.
You know, and all these things that you just need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
And it's not tough to do.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, the other thing that there's this concept called visitability. So, even if, let's say, you yourself and your family don't have a disability, I mean, you also have parents who are grandparents and over time, and you want them to visit, hopefully. I know I do. And so, just thinking about, well, how can we also increase the visitability so that they can come? Because that intergenerational social connection, right? Like going back to social integration is so helpful. Grandparents live longer, apparently, if they're more around their kids. So remember that.
Think about it. We have friends that use walkers. And,
Yeah.
I mean, you can come right into our front door and no steps. I mean, the
Yeah, absolutely.
ability is a visitor.
I know it's a hard visitability.
We have a friend who has a motorized chair, can roll right in our house.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't go see other people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and just think of how wonderful that is for him, right? Like, because it's seamless. There's no, like, in your face, like, this is an adapted home. It's seamless. And I think that's really important. It's subtle. And that's the thing, is universal design, it doesn't have to be in your face. It really can just be integrated into that, whatever aesthetic. Exactly, yeah. Just being thoughtful and taking that time. So, yeah.
I'm going to ask you, as far as suppliers of materials and things like that, are you seeing them become more aware of what they need to be doing as far as giving these kinds of examples and having the supplies for people to set up universal design?
So when you say suppliers, like, what do you mean?
Well, like, for instance, a rubberized, material.
Oh, sure.
Grounds,
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, we've done a little bit of research on that. That is really hard to find folks that are doing that, and then when you do, there's not very many.
Sure.
Competition isn't very good pricing-wise and stuff either.
Sure. So then they can, yeah. I mean, I would say a lot of my work has been in parks and recreation space. I do agree. I think that the options are limited. I mean, in the ones that I've done, I think I think 3 out of 4 of them have been like the same vendor. For the most part. So I would agree with you on that for sure. But I very slowly, I have started to see like a shift of thinking, but it's very slow, and so I'm hoping that sometime it will just kind of click. I would say one thing, a promising thing, is even with the architect organizations that I've been working with. There's been a lot of aha moments of like, why weren't we doing that before? Like, so it just kind of takes that, it kind of takes, having those moments, and then after that, it's like the buy-in's there. You're not having to sell it anymore. So, but it takes a lot of work. But yeah. So. Awesome. Yeah. And it takes a community like you to invite someone like me. So, so it's really, yeah, again, I owe a lot to Spencer, I will just say. And so it's really special that I'm able to come back and share what I've learned since I've left, to a community that taught me so much. So thank you guys so much again for having me. And anytime you need an accessibility assistance, I hope you'll reach out to me. So, yeah. Thank you guys.